I knew I was the outsider from the very first time I stepped into my husband's house. No one said it out loud, but the way they looked at me was enough to crush my chest. There was something cold, something toxic like smoke, that seeped into every meal, every conversation I was never fully a part of. For the past 6 years, I'd lived with a family that never truly wanted me there. And the scariest part? My husband, the one who was supposed to be my rock, was the most indifferent of them all. If you think being hated by your in-laws is the worst thing, wait until I tell you about that last Christmas. The one where everything literally exploded. My name is Everly, I'm 34, and I live in the suburbs of Boston. I work as an accountant for a small tech company. Not rich, but enough to live comfortably. I met Oliver when we were both in grad school in Massachusetts, and we got married after 2 years of dating. Back then I thought I had found the love of my life. A warm, funny man who always said he'd protect me from the world if he had to. What I didn't realize was that the world would start right in the house he grew up in. Oliver's family is very traditional in the way they proudly describe as American values. His mother, Helen, a woman in her 60s with perfectly styled blonde hair and piercing eyes, never liked me. I knew it from the first handshake, when she squeezed my hand so hard it hurt, and gave a half smile like she was inspecting a defective product. Oliver's 2 sisters, Candace and Julia, weren't any better. The 3 of them were like a block of ice, united in keeping me on the outside. At first I thought they just needed time. I tried starting conversations, brought nice wine to every gathering, even learned to make Helen's exact recipe for pumpkin pie to impress her. But every effort was like throwing stones into a dry well. They didn't care. They didn't want someone like me, and the more I tried, the more they backed away, polite, distant, and absolutely closed off to me. Helen was great at pretending to be friendly in front of others, but behind closed doors she treated me like a housekeeper, not a daughter-in-law. She'd make me wash dishes while she and her daughters sat sipping wine, reminiscing about European trips I'd never heard of. They'd talk about family memories, inside jokes only they understood, and laugh until they cried while I sat alone at the far end of the table, forcing a smile like I wasn't hurt. At first I used to tell Oliver. He'd just shrug and say, "You're overthinking it, Everly, they just need time." Candace said, "I don't fit into this family, what am I supposed to do?" "Don't let it get to you. My mom's just a little strict, but she's a good person." I heard those same lines for the first 3 years. By the 4th year, I stopped talking. They never added me to the family group chat. They planned ski trips to Vermont, birthday parties for Oliver's dad, whom I've never met because he passed away long ago, or lunch dates downtown. Without ever telling me. I only found out through pictures tagged with Oliver's name on Facebook, with captions like, "Family is everything." Last Christmas, they did a private gift exchange at Helen's house the day before the official celebration. I only found out because I came home early from work that day and saw Candace's and Julia's cars parked outside Helen's place. When I walked in, they were gathered around the Christmas tree, unwrapping presents, and fell silent when they saw me. Candace gave a weak smile. "Oh, you're home early, we were gonna call you later." Helen took a sip of wine, eyes fixed on the TV. A few small gifts, nothing big. Nothing big. And there I was, in my wrinkled work clothes, watching the 3 of them giggle together, holding Sephora bags, bottles of Italian wine, and cashmere scarves. Oliver was on his phone, not even looking up. But that wasn't the breaking point. The real breaking point came this Christmas. When they gave gifts to everyone in the family, except me. I didn't know what I expected when I walked into Helen's mansion that afternoon, but it definitely wasn't that kind of blatant humiliation. The house smelled of cinnamon and baked butter, the scent of warm memories I'd never been part of. The living room sparkled with fairy lights. The Christmas tree stood taller than anyone and was decorated perfectly, and everything looked like it came straight out of Better Homes and Gardens. Candace was laughing loudly at one of Julia's not-so-funny stories, while Helen stood in the open-concept kitchen, still wearing her cooking gloves but already reapplying her wine-colored lipstick. Oliver was pouring white wine for his mom, looking annoyingly carefree. He didn't even notice I was standing behind him for almost a full minute, completely ignored. When dinner started, everyone gathered around a long table covered with a white lace cloth, glassware, scented candles, and a turkey Helen dramatically placed in the center like some sacred offering. I sat at the far end, across from Candace and Julia, while Helen sat at the head of the table like a queen ruling her Connecticut palace. Dinner went exactly as I expected. All about them. Candace bragged about her trip to Napa Valley with her new boyfriend. Julia talked about the art exhibit she was invited to, though I knew she was just tagging along. Helen kept praising her daughters, throwing in the occasional jab about women who don't know how to make proper pumpkin pie. A not-so-subtle dig aimed directly at me. I said nothing, just smiled and took small sips of wine to keep myself composed. I thought, maybe if I stayed quiet this time, they'd go easier on me. I was wrong. As dessert was being served, Helen clapped her hands 3 times like she was about to announce something grand. Before we eat the pie, I have a little surprise. She smiled brightly, eyes scanning the table. I immediately felt uneasy. Helen pulled out a large gift bag from under her chair and began handing them out one by one. The dark red bag had each person's name printed on a label. Candace received a leather handbag from a brand I knew for sure cost no less than $500. Julia got an all-inclusive 2-day spa voucher at a luxury resort. Oliver was given a bottle of rare whiskey he had mentioned during dinner 3 months ago. I sat still, gripping my wine glass, trying to swallow the icy feeling in my stomach. In the end, there were no bags left. My name wasn't on any of them. Helen turned to me with a fake look of surprise. "Oh dear, Everly, looks like I forgot about you." She laughed. Candace laughed. Julia giggled. Oliver, my husband, laughed too. The kind of laugh that didn't even try to hide it. I froze. For a brief moment, I felt like I was sitting naked in a crowded room, with no one bothering to hide their contempt anymore. "It's okay," I said, my voice strangely calm. I gently set my glass down, looking straight into Helen's eyes. "Good thing I didn't forget about you." The room went dead silent. Like my voice had just interrupted a perfect symphony. Helen raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what do you mean by that?" I just smiled. "You'll see." Candace frowned. Julia glanced at Helen. Oliver stopped laughing. The air turned cold for a few seconds, like a breeze had just swept through. I said nothing more. I just sat there, slowly slicing into my pumpkin pie, savoring every confused stare thrown my way. For the first time in 6 years, I didn't feel small. For the first time, I saw fear in their eyes. Even if they didn't yet understand why. And that was only the beginning. I pulled a small box from my handbag, wrapped in shiny silver paper and tied with a red ribbon, like something straight out of a luxury gift shop. I handed it to Helen with both hands, slowly, making sure everyone at the table could see. "For you," I said, my eyes never leaving her proud face that was starting to darken. Candace and Julia looked at each other, then back at their mother. Oliver blinked rapidly, as if he couldn't believe that Everly, the quiet, gentle wife who always endured, had just hit back like this. Helen looked at the box as if it held a venomous snake. Her hand trembled slightly, though she tried to maintain her usual condescending attitude. "Oh, you didn't have to do that. I thought you knew I never expect anything from you." "I know," I replied softly. "This gift is very special." Curiosity started creeping around the room. Candace raised an eyebrow. Julia sat up straight. Oliver tilted his head toward me, no longer smirking. Helen untied the ribbon, cautiously unwrapped the paper. When she pulled out the thick stack of papers inside, I saw her hand begin to tremble for real. No more pretending. "What is this?" Her voice was hoarse. "Financial reports from your event planning company. And a few amended tax returns from the past 7 years." I poured myself another glass of wine, neither fast nor slow. "Did you know you underreported at least $240,000 in revenue over the last 3 years?" And that's not even counting the personal expenses from the company account. The silence crashed down like a sudden storm. The atmosphere changed. No one laughed anymore. The only sounds were the rustle of paper in Helen's hands, and her sharp breathing. Julia was the first to speak. "Mom, what is this? Is this real?" Candace snatched the documents, skimmed through them, and her eyes widened. "You hid this from us?" Helen didn't answer. She stared at the pages as if she could will them to disappear. Her lips were pressed so tightly they'd gone pale. Her other hand clenched the armrest until her knuckles turned white. I took a sip of wine. "I just wanted to make sure you don't forget to report to the IRS like you forgot me at this dinner." Oliver spoke up, his voice low and sharp. "Everly, are you insane? You were spying on my mom?" I turned to him, lips curling. "No, I investigated. There's a big difference. And I did it because I have eyes. I see things that someone as blind as you can't." Helen slammed her hand on the table and stood up abruptly. "You have no idea what you've just done, Everly." "Oh, I know exactly what I've done." I remained seated, eyes fixed on her. "And I also know you've evaded taxes, hidden assets, and falsified financial statements. But you did something worse than that." Candace growled. "What could be worse?" I looked up, straight at her. "You lied to your own children, hid money while pretending you couldn't help Candace fix her house, and turned Julia away when she was unemployed." Julia turned to Helen, eyes brimming with tears. "You told me you didn't have a cent. You said you had to save for retirement." Candace's face turned red, and she slammed her hand on the table. "And meanwhile you're going to luxury spas, booking first-class flights, and wiring money into a secret account?" Helen looked at me like she wanted to kill me. But I saw something else in her eyes. Real fear. Oliver turned to his mother, stammering. "Mom, is this true?" "Michael, don't listen to this woman, she's making things up." "Is it true?" My voice was ice cold. I pushed the USB stick toward him. "All the evidence is here, bank receipts, statements, internal emails from your mom's accountant." Helen lunged to grab it, but Julia held her back. "No, I want to see it. I want to know how much you've kept from us. And from Dad." The air in the room turned thick. And when Julia scrambled through the pages, their eyes darting back and forth in a frenzy, Helen turned to me, eyes blazing. "You've destroyed this family." "No, you started that a long time ago." I just pulled back the curtain. Oliver was silent, his face pale. I saw his gaze flicker between his mother and me, torn between blood and truth. But I no longer waited for anything from him. I just looked straight at Helen, no longer afraid. The Christmas dinner ended with a very special gift. Candace was the first to break the silence. She flipped quickly through a page in the file, eyes widening at Helen. "Wait, what is this, a transaction from Dad's account?" I tilted my head, slowly sipping my wine. Helen stood frozen, her hand gripping the chair as if she might crush it. Julia leaned forward, fingers trembling as she turned the pages. Stopping at a bank statement. "Mom, you withdrew money from Dad's retirement account? This transaction is clearly from his 401k. "No way," Candace stammered, turning to Helen, her face stripped of its usual arrogance. "You told us you didn't touch a penny." Helen clenched her jaw, trying to stay calm, but her eyes began to go vacant. The wrinkles around her mouth twitched, like they were holding back another lie, but this time, the words didn't come out in time. "What did you use Dad's money for?" Julia's voice was tight, eyes red. "I just borrowed it. I was going to put it back," Helen whispered. I laughed, a cold, sharp laugh like a blade. "How? With the way you've hidden money and manipulated the books, I don't think you ever had a plan to put it back." Candace threw the papers down on the table. "Oh my God, you lied to me. Said you had no money when I was trying to mortgage the house to buy a little condo for the kids. Julia had to borrow from her ex just to pay for hospital bills when the baby was sick." Julia bit her lip, clenching her fists. "You watched us struggle like that and still pretended you couldn't help. Meanwhile, you You were moving money out of the account of the man who lived with you for over 35 years? Helen turned away, but there was nowhere left to hide. Her eyes met mine. I said nothing, just sat there quietly, like a mirror reflecting the truth. The dining room door suddenly opened. Richard, Helen's husband, walked in wearing a gray sweater, still holding a half-finished cup of tea. He stopped when he sensed the tension, thick as a snapped wire. "What's going on?" Candace turned sharply. "Dad, you need to see this." She picked up the file, her hands shaking as she handed it to him. Richard took it slowly. He began to read, his brow furrowing deeper with each line, his face flushing red. "Helen, is this real?" Helen stepped forward, grabbing his hand. "I did it for the family. I had to keep the company, keep up appearances. I was going to tell you once things were better." Richard stepped back, as if someone had splashed cold water in his face. "You took money from my retirement account without saying a word?" I had never seen Richard so angry. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice trembling, but full of barely contained rage. "I worked my whole life for that money, Helen. I trusted you would never touch it without my consent." Helen tried to recover. "I just needed a small amount to reinvest. You know the company's been struggling." Candace screamed. "It's not about the company, Mom. You used that money for luxury, travel, shopping, transferring it into undeclared private accounts. You lied to all of us." Richard could no longer hold himself together. He threw the papers to the floor, then backed into the wall, bracing himself on the table for balance. I feel betrayed. I can't believe you did this." "Richard, please, I had my reasons." "There's no reason good enough to deceive your partner like this," his voice snapped. "I trusted you. I trusted you completely." Julia bowed her head, tears spilling down. "Mom, how could you?" Helen turned to me, her eyes now blazing. "You're behind this. You set me up. I knew it." I smirked. "No one set you up. You've been setting yourself up for years. I just pulled the curtain down." Helen lunged toward me, but Richard raised his hand to stop her. "Enough. Helen, if what I just read is true, then I'm going to speak to a lawyer. I can't live with someone who took everything without a second thought." This time Helen didn't fight back. She stood still, lips pressed tight, her face pale like ashes. And in that room, still glowing with Christmas lights, a family, officially shattered. But it wasn't over. I knew it was only the beginning. Richard didn't respond. He stood frozen by the dining table, eyes locked on the scattered papers on the floor. I saw his hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His chest rising and falling violently, like he was trying to swallow a rage too big to speak. "I can't believe this," he mumbled, but the sound echoed in the silent room, like a bomb. Candace and Julia were both silent. Oliver sat frozen, eyes darting from me to his mother, and then back to his father. The whole room seemed frozen in a chaotic moment, where all masks had fallen, but no one knew what to do next. Richard stumbled a step forward, then stopped. I can't breathe." He clutched his chest, his face turning pale as if the blood had drained out. "Dad?" Julia cried, jumping to her feet. I rushed to him at the same time as Candace. Oliver sprang from his chair, his glass shattering on the floor, but no one looked. "Richard!" Helen screamed. But her voice rang out shrill and theatrical, like she was playing a bad scene in a bad play. He bent over, his whole body collapsing forward like a tree cut at the base. I caught him along with Candace, but he was heavy, limp. His body convulsed slightly before falling completely still. "Call an ambulance," I shouted, pulling my phone from my pocket instinctively. "He's having a heart attack." Julia immediately dialed 911, her voice shaky but clear. "We need an ambulance, please hurry, please." Helen dropped to the floor, holding her head in her hands. Oh God, Richard, I'm sorry, don't leave me." But no one turned to her. No one comforted her. No one believed her. I looked at Helen, my eyes sharp as blades. She was trying to cry, but there were no tears, just fake sobs and deliberately trembling hands, as if performing for some invisible audience. "Don't touch him," I said coldly as she started to approach Richard. Candace nodded. "Stay back, Mom, you've done enough." The words hit Helen like a slap. She froze, then turned to look at her daughter with eyes that held no power anymore. The house that once echoed with laughter now held only heavy breathing, the ticking of the clock, and the shivering of a man lying unconscious on an expensive hardwood floor. About 10 minutes later, the ambulance arrived, sirens blaring. 2 EMTs rushed in like a storm. Helen scrambled forward, trying to lead the way, but one of them brushed her aside without hesitation. "We need space." I stepped back, Julia pulling Candace with her. Oliver stood stiff in the middle of the room, as if his brain had shut down. Helen stood dazed, then, suddenly dropped to her knees, sobbing loudly like a scene from a cheap drama. "Please, save him, he's my husband, please." I watched her, seeing every calculated movement, every performative breath. No real tears. No one held Richard as he convulsed. The only person holding his hand was Candace. One of the EMTs turned to us. "He still has a pulse, we're taking him to the nearest hospital." "Whose family?" Candace nodded. "I'm his daughter, I'll go." I placed a hand on her shoulder, speaking softly. "I'll drive you both and follow behind." Helen looked around, her expression lost. I'll come too," Julia said coldly. "No one's stopping you, but don't pretend anymore. We've seen everything." Helen said nothing more. She stood up, staggering after the stretcher like a ghost. We walked to the car in silence. Oliver trailed behind me, but I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see that lost look on his face again. Whatever was left between us had burned to ash the moment Richard collapsed and Helen cried her fake tears. When the ambulance turned off the street, I looked up at the night sky. There were no stars. Only swirling black clouds. That Christmas had no prayers. No warmth. Only truth, wounds, and consequences. And I knew Richard's collapse was only the beginning. The hospital waiting room was strangely cold. Not the cold of air conditioning or November weather, but a quiet, creeping chill that seeped into the skin from prolonged silence and mounting tension. Candace and Julia sat close together, eyes blank, staring off into nothing. I stood near the reception desk, gripping my phone. The screen had long since gone dark, but I didn't let go, as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. Mike sat a few chairs away, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, silently watching. No one spoke for nearly an hour. Then suddenly Mike stood up and walked over to me. "Are you satisfied now?" I blinked, thinking I misheard. "What?" His voice no longer carried calm. It held a kind of shock, but not because his father was in the ER. It was because of me. "This is what you wanted, right? Exposing my mom, humiliating the whole family, sending my dad to the hospital?" I stood frozen, unable to believe what just came out of the mouth of the man I'd shared a bed with for 6 years. "You think I wanted this to happen? You planned it, you held on to all that, you brought it out on Christmas Day in the middle of family dinner, you knew my dad had a heart condition, you think I didn't notice?" Every word hit me like a blow. "So, you're not mad your mom lied, embezzled money, betrayed your father? You're mad I didn't sit still and silent like some porcelain doll?" Mike clenched his fists, his eyes red. "You couldn't have handled it differently? Spoken to her privately, chosen a better time?" I laughed, a dry sound drained of emotion. "A better time? What do you think I've been doing for the past 6 years? I waited, I swallowed my pride, I gave your mother chance after chance to be decent, and all she did was crush my dignity, and you just stood by." Mike turned his face away, but I didn't stop. "I used to think you were neutral, I tried to understand you were caught between your mother and your wife. But today, when you saw clearly that your mother stole money, emptied your father's retirement, lied to your sisters, and you're still standing here blaming me? So tell me, Mike, whose side are you on?" He looked back at me, his eyes heavy. I just wanted to keep this family together. I stepped back, like he had just slapped me. This family was never together, Mike, can't you see? Your mother is a manipulator, she never wanted me here, never. And you? You chose her. Over and over again. You chose silence. Candace stood up, her voice cold. Mike, don't. Mom was wrong, we all saw it. Julia added. Everly didn't break anything, she just brought the truth to light. Mom's the one who put Dad in this position. Mike said nothing, he just looked at me, his eyes shattered. I looked right back, no longer angry, just an immense, cold emptiness spreading through my chest. You just lost your last chance to do the right thing. I don't need you to protect me, Mike. I just needed you to see me. But you never did. I slid my wedding ring off and placed it in his hand. This is the last time I wait for you to choose me. Mike said nothing, his hand clenched the ring so tightly it trembled, as if letting go would shatter everything. But it was already too late. I turned away, not caring what he would say next. I'd heard enough. And for the first time in 6 years I felt relief. A man can be your husband, but if he doesn't stand by you when you need him most, he's just a stranger carrying his mother's last name. I left the hospital right after the doctor announced Richard was out of critical condition but needed close monitoring due to severe heart damage. Candace and Julia stayed to watch over him for the night. Helen had disappeared after a nurse asked her not to interrupt the treatment. Mike was still sitting in the waiting room, looking like someone had drained the life out of him. But I didn't look back, no need. As I walked out to the parking lot, the night wind cut across my face like a blade. But instead of feeling cold, I felt weightless. The wedding ring in my palm felt like a foreign piece of metal, a relic from a life that no longer existed. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the wedding photos on the wall, the souvenirs from our honeymoon in Oregon, the leather chair where Mike used to sit and read sports news. Everything was familiar and completely foreign. I held the ring, placed it in the jewelry box, then took out a small suitcase. Just a few clothes, my laptop, wallet, and passport. I didn't need much, I just needed to leave before I started doubting my decision. The next morning, I sent a short email to the lawyer I had quietly prepared to contact since last month, when I began investigating Helen. The subject line read simply, "Begin divorce proceedings." That afternoon, I got the first message from Mike since our conversation at the hospital. "Everly, I need to talk, please." I didn't respond. 2 weeks later, Helen was summoned by federal authorities for investigation on tax evasion and corporate fraud. All the documents I had given to my lawyer had been sent to the IRS and FBI. Not only was there evidence of tax evasion, but also proof that she used fake employee names to withdraw funds from the Small Business Support Program during the COVID-19 period. The local media picked up the story. Newspapers published photos of Helen leaving court in a gray suit, no makeup, hair a mess. There was no trace left of the proud woman who once smirked through Christmas dinner. I didn't feel satisfied. Just right. After being discharged, Richard filed for divorce immediately. Candace told me via text that he had seen a lawyer straight from the hospital. Julia cut off all contact with their mother. Helen called, messaged, even wrote handwritten letters. But no one replied. Helen lost everything. Her family, her reputation, her company. It all collapsed. And Mike? He sent a flood of emails, ranging from angry to begging. One of them read, "I didn't know it would go this far. You planned to leave me from the start, didn't you?" I sat and stared at the screen, not bothering to reply. There was nothing left to explain. If, after everything, he still thought I was the problem, then there was nothing left to save. One afternoon near the end of the month, Mike showed up outside my new apartment. I looked at him through the security door. "Everly, please, just 5 minutes." His voice was tired. His eyes sunken. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "What do you want?" "I've thought a lot. I was wrong. I should have stood by you." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. You weren't just wrong, Mike. You chose your mother. You watched me be humiliated, excluded, turned into a joke, and when I stood up you said I was destroying the family. He looked at me, silent. I know you don't trust me anymore. But I'll do anything to make it right. I shook my head. You don't need to. I'm done waiting for anyone to make it right for me. I've already made my choice. I closed the door. Gently. Firmly. No tears. No anger. Inside the apartment, I sat on the sofa, watching the soft golden light stretch across the wooden floor. For the first time in 6 years, I felt peace. Not because Helen fell. Not because Mike finally understood. But because I had freed myself. After the last time Mike showed up at my door, I didn't hear from him again. At least not for the first few weeks. I figured he needed time to accept the truth. That I wasn't coming back. That the wife he thought would wait forever had left. Not with a fight, not with accusations, but with a door that quietly closed without fanfare. 3 weeks later, the first call came. I didn't answer. 4 more calls followed, a voicemail over 2 minutes long, an email with the subject line, "I'm sorry." I sat in a cafe near my apartment, looking at his name on the screen, and felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just silence inside me, like a lake after a storm. I reached out and tapped block number. That was it. No hesitation. No regret. That was the moment I knew I had truly let go. Every morning I wake up at 6 a.m., make myself a cup of coffee, and open the window to watch sunlight pour across the pristine white walls of my new apartment. I'm renting a small studio in the North End. Not far from downtown, but quiet enough that I can hear the leaves fall as winter draws near. I've rebuilt my life on my own terms, neat, peaceful, free of yelling voices or awkward dinners. I've learned to grocery shop alone without feeling empty. Learned to eat dinner in silence without feeling lonely. I buy myself fresh flowers on Fridays, read on Sundays, and revise my personal financial plan at the start of each month. I don't talk to Mike. I don't text his mother. And when Helen was officially charged with financial fraud, I didn't celebrate. I just folded up the newspaper and threw it in the trash. Because by then I had understood. Real victory isn't when someone else falls. It's when they no longer have power over you. Candace and Julia still keep in touch. They send thank you notes, even though they know I don't need them. Once, Julia wrote, "If it weren't for you, our whole family would still be living in denial. I'm sorry we let you suffer for so long." I didn't reply, but I smiled. That was enough. A month after Helen's case hit the major newspapers, Mike called again. A strange number. I knew right away. This time, I didn't wait for the third ring. I declined the call. 3 days later he emailed. "I have no excuses left. But I've started therapy. I need to fix everything, including myself. Not to get you back. But so I can look in the mirror without shame." I read it. Then clicked archive. I no longer need an apology. I need freedom. And I found it on my own. One Saturday afternoon, as Boston fell into an early cold rain, I sat inside the old bookstore at the corner of Hanover Street. I sipped coffee, flipping through a novel I never had time to read when I was still Mike's wife. A middle-aged woman sitting next to me smiled. "That's a good one, you'll like the ending." I nodded, smiling back. I just had an ending of my own. She didn't ask more. I didn't need to explain. I stepped out of the shop as the drizzle continued. The streets were wet and cold, but I felt strangely warm. Freedom for the first time in my life wasn't a distant idea anymore. It was an afternoon without shouting. A hot cup of coffee no one complained about. Being alone, and feeling full. I used to think happiness was being loved. Now I understand, happiness is learning to love yourself. I don't know what lies ahead. But one thing I know for sure. I will never go back to being the woman I was in that house. I've made my choice. I choose me. Everly's story is a powerful reminder of what it means to wake up after years of being ignored and dismissed by the people closest to you. She didn't seek revenge through anger, but through truth, and the strength to walk away when she realized she deserved better. In real life, sometimes we need to let go of toxic relationships, even if it means being alone. Because loving yourself isn't selfish, it's the journey of reclaiming your worth and your peace. What do you think about Everly's decision? Would you have done the same in her place? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss the next emotional family story.